All right, what? I need this. All right. Good evening, everyone. Thanks for having me. This is awesome. All right, let's get the energy back up in this room because it's late and I know that I am the person standing between you and drinks. So let's get aboard this rocket ship. So I'm going to talk about managing hypergrowth, and this doesn't necessarily mean just going from 0 to 100 million of revenue or 0 to $1 billion of revenue. This applies to the founder or the co-founder that gets their first customer and now is faced with growth. What do we do, right? So I've got 29 slides, 5 minutes, so it's going to feel a little like being on this rocket ship. All right, so I was spending a lot of time last night building this chart. So I think there's a common misconception that growth should look like this, up and to the right. But in reality, growth is awkward. It's painful and it's awkward. And despite everything that you hear in the media about SoftBank, WeWork, they know a thing or two about growth. And Masa-san is right. Every time you double, everything breaks. And as a founder, you should actually be inspiring to make everything break. Your systems break, your processes break, your org structures break, your physical spaces break. You know, we've actually broken software and hardware, so you want everything to break. And the reality is, instead of a chart that looks up and to the right, you get a chart that looks more like this. And this is a 10-year period between 1997 and 2007. Can anyone guess whose stock price chart that is between that time? Anyone? Yes. There you go. So if you zoom out, it's Amazon. But if you were an employee between 1997 and 2007, it did not feel like this. It did not feel like up and to the right. It felt very much up and down. It felt painful and awkward. And so I went through a similar roller coaster ride when I was at Uber. And although that chart looks up and to the right, it certainly didn't feel like that. We grew to over $1 billion in revenue in Canada. We expanded to over 100 markets. We signed partnerships like McDonald's and Starbucks and A&W. And I got a team that really loved what they were doing. And so that was very important to me. The culture obviously is super important around any company, which you heard today. And while I was at Uber, I carried around this little gray notebook. And in this little gray notebook, I wrote notes about my meetings. But in the back, I actually wrote down every single learning and failure that I had over my course of time there. And really helpful as I kind of look back at my time during hypergrowth to kind of extract the knowledge and learnings that I had in my time. And so I'm taking all those learnings and now applying it to my new startup, which is Clutch. And we're an online platform for selling cars. Pretty simple. Click a button, buy a car. And although there's pages of notes in the back of that gray notebook, I wanted to share some of the key learnings that I had in that time, which are 3. Fake it until you make it. Empower your people, which you heard a little bit about today, and find your operating rhythm. And so fake it until you make it. So on the outside, when I joined Uber, I thought everything on the inside would be equally elegant, simple, seamless. Going into a company that was worth $50 billion, you just assumed everything was working. Yet, that was not the case. On the inside, it was chaos. It was absolute chaos. We were loading Ubers with pad thais in a parking lot and driving them around the city so people would buy them. We were hauling bags of food up and down an elevator. It was not simple, elegant, or easy. On the outside, we're trying to do the same thing at Clutch. We're trying to make car buying as easy as possible. You browse your inventory, you book online, we bring the test drive to you, and you buy with confidence. On the inside, though, that is not the case. On the inside, we are digging cars out of the snow. That guy locked the car keys inside that car, and we're managing all our deliveries using a whiteboard. And so, when I say fake it till you make it, you gotta hustle like a duck. So, on the surface, you are cool, calm, and collected. But beneath, you are hustling and you are running hard. All right, number 2, empower your people. All right, so Travis had this reputation of being super hard-driving, authoritarian, dictatorial. But the first time I met him, he called himself the chief problem-solving officer, which I thought that was very important because he viewed himself as someone that was going to help everyone solve their problems. He was incredible at building a culture of problem-solving, creativity, autonomy. And so when I think about my team, probably the most important learning that I took away from my time at Uber was building a culture of problem-solving. And what that really means is building a culture where people are highly aligned and highly autonomous. And so I use this problem of crossing a river, right? Everyone here is given the task of crossing a river. And if you're in an environment with very low alignment and low autonomy, everyone's running around not knowing that they need to cross a river and being told what to do, but not really towards that goal. In a world where you have really high alignment and really low autonomy, everyone knows they need to cross the river, but you've got a boss that's telling you to build a bridge. On the right, on the bottom right, where you have really high autonomy and low alignment, you got someone that's saying, hey, I hope someone's fixing that river problem, and people are just running around doing whatever they want. What you're trying to get to is a world where you have really high alignment and really high autonomy. In that world, everyone knows they need to cross the river, and they have the freedom and creativity to go figure it out. And that's where you get a lot of innovation, you get problem solving, you got creativity born. And so maybe building a bridge isn't the right answer. Maybe the answer is actually just jumping on a boat. Maybe the answer is swimming across. Or maybe the answer is just walking because the river is only 2 inches deep. So what you want to do is you got to empower your people, and what that really means is create a problem-solving culture with really high autonomy and really high alignment. And so this guy crossed the river on a jet ski to take his commute down by an hour, by more than 2 hours or something like that. So number 3, find your operating rhythm. This was something our new CEO, Dara, talked about a lot, finding your operating rhythm. And a lot of these data-driven frameworks that people come up with put a lot of emphasis on the data-driven decision-making, but they don't spend enough time talking about the action. And that's what's really important, because a lot of folks, there's smart people in this room, you got some SQL experts, you can extract data. You've got the ability to drive insight from that data is relatively straightforward. The hardest part is actually actioning that data. And so successful companies find their operating rhythm. And what that means, for me at least, is you find the key metrics of the business, you assign accountability, you review those metrics, and then you drive action from that, and you start that over again. And so whether it's on a weekly or daily or monthly cadence, you got to be meeting with your team, reviewing those metrics, assigning accountability, and figuring out what you need to do as a team. And I think that's probably the most important thing, because when you're in that operating rhythm, you know things are gelling, things are moving forward, and you're really starting to run that business. And so when I talk about finding your operating rhythm, what that means is you leverage your data, drive accountability, and action. I think those are the most important things. So my math here isn't perfect, but this is my formula for building hypergrowth. First, you add a little bit of hustle, like a duck. You create a culture of creative problem solving, and you leverage that data to drive actionable actions. So with that, I hope this helps people in this room build that next hypergrowth company with a little bit of help. And so thank you for that time, and appreciate any questions.
Hello, over here. My name is Hugo. Actually, I guess everybody here is very inspirational. You all have a vision and a strategy where you're going to go. My question is, how do you adapt yourself to employees' ideas, a new way of thinking that doesn't affect your ego, because you're an A personality driving a vision and idea?
Yeah, so everyone in this room has an ego, I'm assuming. The problem is you should never let that get in the way. I think that should be the last thing that you should be concerned about. I think ego is what actually probably destroys companies. I think the harder question is, how do you take all this great information and distill it down to what's important, what actually is going to drive or move the needle? I think that kind of goes back to hustle like a duck, right? In the sense that, when you have these great ideas, you figure out the ones that kind of make sense, and then just run at them. I think, Uber Eats, and I don't know if people know the story behind Uber Eats. Uber Eats was an experiment that we ran back in 2015. Travis literally asked the question. He was like, hey, what if we start putting stuff in Ubers? Instead of people, just stuff, like toilet paper and toothpaste, maybe groceries, maybe some food. And so we did all of that. We just put stuff in Ubers, drove them around, and see what people wanted to buy. Turns out there's a big demand for food, and so we started this marketplace around food. Lo and behold, 3 years later, it became a $15 billion company, or business. But ultimately, you start early, you start small. What's the MVP? You try to figure out where to test, and I think that's if you build that culture where you have this innovation, when you have people coming up with problems or problem-solving, solutions to different issues, you'll come up with really cool and innovative stuff, and literally could be in the next multi-billion-dollar idea. I don't know. Yes.
Hi. I think the fake it till you make it advice is an amazing one, and I think the founding team usually have that kind of attitude. Have you had a problem with some of the people that are outside of the founding team not being motivated, especially when you're looking at something from the inside and seeing how broken it is? How can you make sure that the team that is not part of the founding team is actually motivated to get the job done?
Yeah, I think you talked a little bit about today. It all starts with hiring. You find people that are really excited about the problem that you're solving. I think this, again, goes back to this problem-solving culture. There's two types of people. When you interview someone, there's people, when you tell them about your biggest problem at the company, there's people that, you're like, I've got this crazy problem. And if you're interviewing them and you talk to them about this problem, there's a kind of person that kind of leans back and like, whoa, I don't want to, that seems like a crazy problem. I don't think I want to try that, right? And there's others that are like, whoa, tell me more. Like, let me try to fix that, right? If you can find people that are like that, right, and you've got really interesting problems to solve, you usually get pretty motivated folks, right? So, ultimately, I think at the root of any successful company is one where you can really build a problem-solving culture.
Thank you.
All right.